The church fell silent the moment she said it. No one marries a single mom with 3 kids. The words were barely louder than a whisper, but somehow every person in the room heard them. Maybe it was because the pain in her voice was impossible to ignore. Maybe it was because everyone already knew her story. Emily Carter stood near the back row, clutching her youngest daughter's hand while her 2 sons sat beside her. Her eyes stayed fixed on the floor. Years of disappointment had taught her not to expect kindness from the world. The charity event had gathered hundreds of people. Families laughed together. Couples posed for photographs. Children ran through the aisles. Emily felt invisible. 32 years old. 3 children. 2 jobs. Endless bills. And abandoned. Her ex-husband had disappeared 5 years earlier, leaving her with debt, heartbreak, and 3 terrified children who cried themselves to sleep for months. Since then she had heard every cruel comment imaginable. No man wants that responsibility. You already have 3 kids. Your life is too complicated. Good luck finding anyone. At first she fought the words. Eventually she believed them. So when her friend Sarah joked about finding her a husband during the charity auction, Emily simply smiled and shook her head. No one marries a single mom with 3 kids. The sentence escaped before she could stop it. Then a deep voice answered behind her. I will. Emily froze. The room froze. Everyone turned. Standing near the entrance was a tall man holding the hand of a little girl. He looked calm. Confident. Completely serious. Emily stared at him. The stranger stared back. I said, he repeated. I will. People began whispering immediately. Who was he? Was he joking? Did he know her? Emily certainly didn't know him. The man stepped forward. My name is Daniel Brooks. The little girl beside him smiled. And this is my daughter Lily. Emily felt her heart stumble. Single dad. The realization hit instantly. Daniel walked closer. I overheard what you said. Emily's face turned red. That wasn't meant for everyone to hear. Maybe, Daniel replied gently. But I heard it. The room watched like it was witnessing a movie. Daniel looked at Emily's children. Then at Lily. Then back at her. You said no one marries a single mom with 3 kids. His expression softened. I think that's because you've been listening to the wrong people. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Then Daniel smiled. Because if the right person comes along, he doesn't see 3 extra children. He looked directly at her sons and daughter. He sees a family. For the first time in years, Emily felt tears forming. Not because she believed him. Because she wanted to. But life had taught her that hope was dangerous. Hope broke people. Hope created expectations. And expectations created heartbreak. So she forced a smile. That's very kind. Daniel nodded. It's also true. The event continued, but something had changed. For the rest of the evening Daniel and Lily remained nearby. The children quickly became friends. Lily played with Emily's youngest daughter. Her sons laughed with Daniel. By the end of the night the kids were sitting together like they'd known each other forever. Emily noticed something unusual. Daniel never tried to impress her. He never flirted. Never made dramatic promises. Instead he listened. When her children spoke, he listened. When Lily spoke, he listened. When volunteers spoke, he listened. The more she watched him, the more curious she became. Before leaving, Daniel handed her a small piece of paper. His phone number. Coffee sometime? Emily hesitated. Then nodded. Coffee. 3 days later they met. Then again the following week. And again after that. Slowly she learned his story. 5 years earlier his wife had died in a car accident. One ordinary morning she left for work. She never came home. Daniel had spent years raising Lily alone. Learning how to braid hair. Learning how to comfort nightmares. Learning how to survive grief. The pain in his eyes wasn't hidden. It was familiar. For the first time Emily met someone who truly understood loneliness. Months passed. The children grew close. Family movie nights became routine. Weekend picnics became traditions. Birthdays became celebrations involving all 4 kids. Then one rainy evening everything changed. Emily received a phone call. Her oldest son Jacob had been injured during football practice. She rushed to the hospital terrified. Daniel arrived 15 minutes later. Without being asked. Without explanation. Without hesitation. He sat beside her for 6 hours. 6 hours. Not once checking his watch. Not once complaining. When doctors finally confirmed Jacob would recover completely, Emily broke down crying. Daniel simply wrapped his arms around her. Nothing romantic. Nothing dramatic. Just support. The kind she hadn't felt in years. That night, driving home, she realized something terrifying. She was falling in love. And that scared her more than anything. Because loving someone meant risking loss again. The following weeks became a battle between her heart and her fears. Daniel noticed. Of course he noticed. One evening he asked directly, "What are you afraid of?" Emily laughed bitterly. "Everything. That's not specific." She stared out the window. "People leave." Daniel didn't answer. "People always leave." Still silent. "My father left." Her voice cracked. "My ex-husband left." Tears appeared. "Eventually everyone leaves." Daniel finally spoke. "No." Emily turned. "No? Not everyone." His voice was calm. Steady. Certain. "You're still here." The words stunned her. "What?" "You were abandoned," Daniel said softly. "You were betrayed." He pointed gently toward her children. "But you stayed." Emily felt tears roll down her cheeks. "You never left them." The truth hit harder than any compliment. Because she had never viewed herself that way. She saw failure. Exhaustion. Mistakes. Daniel saw strength. Months later he proposed. Not at a fancy restaurant. Not during some elaborate event. Instead it happened during a family camping trip. All 4 children sat around a fire. Marshmallows roasted. Laughter filled the air. Then Daniel suddenly stood. Emily immediately knew something was happening. His hands were shaking. That alone was shocking. Nothing seemed to shake Daniel. But now he looked terrified. He knelt. Pulled out a ring. And before speaking to Emily, he turned toward the children. "Jacob." The boy looked surprised. "Ethan." Another nod. "Sophie." The little girl smiled. Daniel swallowed hard. "I know I can never replace anyone." The children listened carefully. "But if you'll let me," his voice cracked, "I'd like to spend the rest of my life protecting all of you." Emily began crying instantly. The children did too. Then Daniel looked at her. "Will you marry me?" Nobody breathed. Nobody moved. Then Sophie shouted first. "Say yes!" Everyone laughed. Jacob shouted next. "Mom!" Ethan joined. "Say yes!" Emily laughed through tears. Then nodded. "Yes." The forest exploded with cheers. But the biggest shock came later. Much later. A week before the wedding. Emily accidentally discovered something Daniel had hidden for nearly a year. Something unbelievable. Something impossible. She wasn't snooping. She wasn't searching. She simply opened the wrong envelope while organizing paperwork. And froze. Her eyes widened. She read the document once. Twice. 3 times. Surely it was wrong. Surely she misunderstood. Because according to the paperwork, Daniel owned one of the largest logistics companies in the country. Not managed. Owned. Her hands shook. She immediately searched online. Minutes later she sat speechless. There he was. News articles. Business magazines. Interviews. Photographs. Net worth estimates reaching hundreds of millions. Emily couldn't breathe. The man she loved wasn't just a single dad. He was a billionaire. When Daniel arrived home that evening, he found her sitting silently at the kitchen table. The documents lay before her. He immediately understood. For a long moment neither spoke. Then Emily whispered, "You're a billionaire?" Daniel sighed. "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me?" Silence. "Daniel." His eyes lowered. "Because I was terrified." That answer surprised her. "Terrified?" "Yes." He sat across from her. "Every relationship after my wife's death changed the moment people learned about the money." His voice carried years of disappointment. "They stopped seeing me." Emily listened quietly. "They saw the bank account." Pain filled his expression. "They saw opportunities." He looked at her. "But you never knew." The realization hit her. Everything suddenly made sense. The modest clothes. The simple dates. The ordinary lifestyle. Daniel had hidden his wealth intentionally. I wanted someone to love me. His voice cracked. Not my money. Emily reached across the table. Took his hand. You idiot. Daniel blinked. What? You absolute idiot. A nervous smile appeared. You thought I'd leave because you're rich? He laughed softly. Something like that. Emily squeezed his hand. Daniel. Yes? I fell in love with the man who spent 6 hours in a hospital chair. Tears formed in his eyes. I fell in love with the father who treats my children like his own. More tears. I fell in love with the man who listened. She smiled. Not the billionaire. For the first time since discovering the truth, Daniel relaxed. The wedding arrived 2 weeks later. It wasn't held in a luxury resort. It wasn't held in some billionaire mansion. Instead, it took place in the same church where everything had begun. The same church where Emily whispered that nobody would marry a single mom with 3 kids. Hundreds attended. Friends. Family. Neighbors. Volunteers. Teachers. People whose lives had been touched by either Emily or Daniel. As Emily walked down the aisle, she noticed many guests crying. Not because of wealth. Not because of status. Because everyone knew the journey. The loneliness. The struggles. The heartbreak. At the altar Daniel waited. Beside him stood Lily. Beside Emily stood her 3 children. Then the pastor smiled. Before we begin, he said, I would like to remind everyone of something that happened in this church over a year ago. Laughter spread. Many remembered. The pastor pointed toward Emily. She said something. More laughter. Emily covered her face. Then the pastor pointed toward Daniel. And this man answered. Now everyone smiled. The pastor chuckled. Emily said nobody marries a single mom with 3 kids. Daniel grinned. The church fell silent. Then the pastor asked him, And what did you say? Daniel looked directly at Emily. The same way he had that very first day. And with the same confidence, he answered, I will. People erupted into applause. Some cried openly. Others laughed through tears. Emily couldn't stop crying. Because in that moment she finally understood something. The world had spent years convincing her she was too damaged. Too complicated. Too burdened. Too broken to be chosen. But the right person never saw obstacles. The right person saw value. The right person saw family. The right person saw love. And sometimes the greatest miracle isn't finding someone perfect. Sometimes it's finding someone who looks at everything others call baggage and says, I'll carry it with you. Then Daniel took her hand. The children gathered around them. And together they became the family nobody expected, but everyone would remember forever.